today we're going to talk about resolving conflicts and problems. And, as I, that kind of goes along with the last class. And I think it's really good for us because we are developing interpersonal skills that we can use in our daily lives. And a lot of it is figuring out what to say and talking about how do we establish boundaries and limits and rules without, being aggressive or sounding like you're accusing somebody or being bossy. And I think recently I talked about this example of going to the pharmacy with my mom, who is, when she was her full height, was 4'11", right? So she's always been used to being, even as an adult, treated like a child or waited on last or whatever. So she's developed this assertiveness, right? Just stand her ground. And we went up to getting in line, and this lady with a wheelchair came up and she let her go in front of her. And then this man came up and she was like, I'm not letting you go too. And the whole time we were standing in line, the man talked about how rude people have gotten these days. Because, when you're living alone, or especially when you're living alone, you don't know how you sound, right? When you're living with somebody, they tell you that you're sounding like, that they're not going to put up with that you're sounding like, you're rude. And but she didn't realize, I just let it go. I felt a little self-conscious, but she was putting her boundaries. I let this other lady go, even though we got there about the same time, because she was in a wheelchair. But I'm not letting you, this big guy, take cuts in front of me, this little lady, because now she's probably, well, she's shrunk. She's not 4'11" anymore, So, but we don't. And then another example is the mayor of the town where I live was a teacher. And so sometimes when things get a little unruly in the city commission meetings, she'll say something about using her teacher voice. So because she's going to, establish control. And sometimes she sounds like she's scolding children. Right? And no adult likes to sound like you're being scolded like a child. So, So we want to, kind of be conscious of the words that we use and the demeanor that we're conveying. So, and then also, besides being able to use it in our personal lives, we can also help others to manage situations and put them in a framework so that everybody's not getting all irate and out of control. So a problem is a situation in which a current state is separated from an ideal state by obstacles. So we know that, that's a fancy definition, right? But that's saying that something's getting in your way from what you want or what you think the situation should be. It's like I have a stone in the middle of the driveway and I'm tripping over it, right? So problems are an unavoidable part of life. If there's anybody in our short amount of years that hasn't had a problem or hasn't had a problem this week, then you either don't live in this world or you're a saint, right?
That's right.
Because it's a part of life, and we need to learn how to deal with problems without it being so frustrating that we can't handle life. And with a problem, we learn to strive to overcome challenges, whether they're big or small. And some problems are small, but because of what we're going through, they become very big. Right? And, so that's a very important part of having support when we're going through difficulties. And that's where we come in when people are having difficulties, that we can be a calm and balance in the middle of their discussion. So families face difficulties which can be complicated by things like mental illness, and which is a strain on relationships, right? Or other illnesses, and that's when people often come to us, right?
Could you repeat that last sentence? I didn't hear.
Well, families are face difficulties which could be complicated by problems like mental illness or physical illness. So we're helping to support in that, and that's one of those stressors, right? So there's psychological stressors and social stressors that complicate and add pressure to the different things that we're going through. Normally, well, ideally, the way God planned a family, for example, he puts us in families. We start out in families. They can be a source of love and support and security, but they can also be a source of stress and pain. So we're learning to deal with challenges and helping people manipulate and maneuver these challenges, which some family challenges are feeling misunderstood or dismissed, or that their concerns or emotions aren't being deemed valid, right? That, oh, you're just overreacting. But if it's important to them or to us, then it's an important thing. Okay, so some of the other challenges besides being misunderstood, we can have distortions in thinking. Someone could be confused about reality, or even with different illnesses be having hallucinations or delusions. But we can help when you're not thinking clearly or making poor choices. So also there's impaired judgment. People make bad choices with finances, either overspending or they're too controlling. Okay, so other impaired judgment, they might have difficulty deciding how to keep things cleaner, or they have poor boundaries with people, so they're being overcome or overwhelmed by too much activity or too much being asked of them. Another problem today, we find people are being so impulsive, and which leads to lashing out, or they spend money that they can't afford, or they say inappropriate things. And I saw a webinar, and it talked about recently that rudeness is contagious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even if someone isn't being rude to you, the studies show that if you experience or see somebody being rude, you're more likely to be rude. So when we have the social media, we have politicians, we have spokespeople, we have, sports figures, we have people that are just being rude. Mm-hmm. And it's so put out there by the social media that people are just not nice anymore.
It seems that everywhere whatever you hear has a sarcastic tone to it, which is, to me, rude.
Right.
Another way of being rude, because, I mean, some people can be sarcastic.
They're cutting.
But it cuts.
Right.
And it's usually somebody speaking what they think is true to that other person, and they're just trying to say it without saying it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So, and even so-called sitcoms.
Yeah.
Oh,
The kids are wrong.
Yeah. When my girls were little, well, first of all, the Simpsons was never for kids. It was really for adults. But I never let them watch that because they were rude and disrespectful to their parents. And I don't think I ever saw a whole episode. But there's, and on today you've got kids swearing and parents swearing at their kids, and it's there's not any decorum. So
some people just make it part of their personality. They don't have to even be upset, or it's automatic. It just
right, like saying cool, they just say a bad word.
Yeah.
Or an insult. Other challenges we face are safety in our family. There's robberies and domestic violence and threats in the community. People not following their medical treatments and not taking their medication. So there's a lot of different challenges. There's social stigmas and disagreements and lack of harmony, disrupted routines. If we're taking care of somebody that gets sick all of a sudden, then we can't, or if there's a family emergency or urgency, you have to spend all your time doing whatever it takes, and you don't have time to go to the grocery store and to make proper meals, or, sometimes even to take a shower. We feel financial stress. Some people have this overhanging fear, like just waiting for the shoe to drop. That something is, you wake up in the morning, what's going to happen today? Right? And there's just that lack of peace because of not being in the presence of God. And also, we know the God of this world is trying to cause turmoil. But when people are walking on eggshells with their friends or family members or co-workers, it produces stress. And that's, what we're trying to help navigate is how do we have a safe and peaceful structure. So other types of family issues, there's relation conflicts that impact intimacy and connection, right? There's parent conflicts between a parent and a child, between the two parents, or even a parent protecting the child from the other parent, or even the parent from an abusive child, right? There's conflicts around lifestyles, people going against the family's values and beliefs and rules. Parenting activities and responsibilities. There's caregiver stress, people feel burdened. Loved ones resent needing care. There's extended family expectations. I know there's a lot of these young people that have, they're expected to go to this relative and this relative and this relative for a holiday. You have your in-laws and you have all these sets, and it produces stress. So particularly in caregiving, there are risks, and we as caregivers need to set boundaries, and we help people set boundaries. And when you have the boundaries established, then we have a framework. And I think that's one thing that we as Christians kind of neglect. We think we just have to kind of swallow it, right? And just, the Bible does say follow after peace with all men, but I don't have to let you make me a doormat, right? So it's easier for me, and it's kind of part of my personality. So some of these classes are helping me to think, well, if I'm going to be resentful of different things, it's better that I don't. Yeah. I mean, most of the time, if I get upset or angry about something, I just go away and I deal with it internally. But if I don't bring it to somebody's attention, then I'm going to be facing that situation again. And so, yes, we are supposed to forgive, but better communication is what we're trying to foster, not just trying to endure. And that is part of walking in love, being admonishing someone, right? So we need to help people to stick to healthy life plans, to set boundaries, to stand up to abuse or abusive language, okay? Children talking back to their parents, even adult children. So we need to block out time for ourselves and help people to put in their schedule an amount of time just for themselves. Okay. So once we have figured out what kind of boundaries, things that are important to us, okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about boundaries, and that's part of helping with problem solving and conflict resolution, establishing a framework of what you can accept and what's comfortable to you and what you expect of the other person, and insisting that they respect what's important to you. Okay, like Linda was just talking about, well, if you're going to come over, I don't want you to just come over for an hour. I want you to have a meal with us. And so her children would have the choice, right? If I can't spend the time, that amount of time, to just not just drop in, but to sit down and spend a meal time together, then I can choose to either come to visit. You were going to say something, Madeline?
No.
Oh, because I heard your voice. So they can choose to come and spend the amount of time that she wants at the table, or just say, I can't make it this time, right? So if they're coming and stopping in and, well, nice seeing you, Mom. I had a cup of coffee, or I talked to Dad, or I did this, or helped in the yard, and I'm off again, and Linda is uncomfortable with that, then she needs to say something.
And you know what I realized? The reason I said something that I picked up on recently, that she's coming out of duty, and it's good that she comes, but I would rather she came on a different day and have more time there than just pop in and pop out. That's
Right. And so that feeling of duty, what kind of how does that make you feel if somebody comes to see you just because they feel like they have to?
I'd rather they don't come.
Right. So that's making her understand, this makes me feel unimportant when you just come and put in an appearance, and we don't have that, right, that rapport, that time together, okay? So we let people know that we're not okay with that activity or how they're addressing us. Even in an intense discussion, which I guess could be a nice way to talk about a conflict, right? You could say, let me see what I have here. I would like to continue this conversation, but I cannot do so while I'm being called names, or while I'm being treated disrespectfully, or I'm not being listened to. And if this activity behavior continues, I'm going to have to, ask you to leave, hang up the telephone,
Not have as much time for that person to do.
Right. So it's clear what you're expecting. So, and at some point in time, sometimes people cross important boundaries so much that we just have to say, if you're going to continue to do this,
Oh, no.
but no, I'm not going to be able to.
I won't see you often, or you won't hear from me as often.
Right, or even to end the relationship, right? Right. I mean, if you have a friend or a spouse or partner that is not being respectful, then you say, if you continue to do this, you give them a chance, right? I'll have to, I'll say goodbye and we'll talk to you again in a week, or we'll get back to you next time in 2 weeks, or in a month, or, you keep doing this and making me uncomfortable. So it's just better that we don't visit together. Right. And that's not an easy thing. But there was one lady that I'm getting warm here, even. There was one lady that was part of the chaplaincy. She did a class on boundaries, and she had a gentleman friend, and he would be in her driveway when she came home from work. And waiting for her, and she was just not comfortable with that. And so in his relationship, and even just thinking about that, sometimes we want to speak with somebody every day or see them every day, and if they can't work with that, then you either make other arrangements. Well, I can't talk to you on the phone for an hour every day, but we can text. Or, but she was saying, no, I can't. When she comes home from work, she wants to relax or whatever, and she doesn't want that interaction. So she eventually ended the relationship because that wasn't something that this person was comfortable with. And it's kind of, when you're married to someone, or if it's your child, well, it's a little bit more difficult, especially if it's a minor child, right? So also there's bullying, and people manipulate by excluding you. So we need to understand what's going on there, right? If you're not doing what I like, then I'm going to give you the silent treatment, or I'm going to be aggressive and try to pressure you to do what I want. And so we don't respond well to either of those things, right? So sometimes, like I said, when I get upset about something, I just step back to process it. But if you're walking around a workplace, or in a gathering with somebody, or in your home, and one of the people is not talking to you, it can, if they're in a bad mood, or if they have an attitude towards you, it's very uncomfortable, right? So it really is better to say why we're not seeking them out, why we're not why we're not including the person, right? So we can say, I need some space right now, so I'm just going to take some time out by myself so I can think about things. And it may not even be something that person has done, right? And that's an important thing too, for us to start to let people know what they're doing that is getting under our skin, right? Because how many of us really want to needle somebody, right? How many of us really want to bother people that we care about and associate with, our friends and our relatives? I mean, there are some people like that, but they wouldn't be hanging around us very long, right?
So, Trish.
Yes, ma'am.
You haven't mentioned yet the ones that, who are you talking to? It's like when you're on the phone, they want, yeah. Who are you talking to? And it's like, I don't know if it's a pet peeve or it's just something that it just really goes all through me. Why do you need to know who I'm talking to?
Oh, I thought you were talking about you're talking to somebody on the phone and they're trying to figure out, are you talking to me or are you talking to somebody else?
No, it's like you're in your parents' house and you're on the phone. You're grown. You're not a child. You're grown, and they want to know, well, who are you talking to? As if they would know, or your significant other or whatever, well, or you're in a new relationship. Right? Who are you talking to? It's like, why do you need to know?
Okay, so can you guys hear her very well? Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good example. And And so let's come up with a couple of nice ways of saying it's none of your business.
Right, you know? Well, what I did with my mom, when my mom had, she wasn't even doing it to me. She was doing it to someone else in the house. And she was like, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? This was after she had her stroke and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just got to me. I told her, I said, Mom, you really don't need to know. Yes, this is my house. I need to know. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start paying the telephone bill. So that's what I did for years. I paid the telephone bill. I said, now you don't have the right to ask who they're talking to because you don't pay the bill. That was before we had all the cell phone stuff and all that.
Yeah, somebody said that was a drastic thing. So that could that could be an offensive thing, right? So let's. I was trying to think of some different grades.
My friend does it. I don't say why, but then I'll start laughing to hear them all. Why? Why?
Okay, so Doreen says she would just kind of laugh and say, "Oh, why? All right, ha ha ha. Yeah, okay, what? So that's one way, you just kind of pass it off. But another thing is
no, you can pass it off. They get serious about that. Like, who are you talking to?
Yeah, some people do. So it also, so if there is that. So what are some suggestions about what we could say to somebody that that would be letting them know that this is not.
Well, I can tell you what I said to Dave this morning.
Okay.
It's a little different.
That's her husband.
Circumstance, but I said it to be funny because he's forever. I said, just think about it, Dave. When we get to heaven, we won't be fighting like this every morning.
She said, when we get to heaven, we won't be fighting like this every morning. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I mean, you could kind of be a little joking, but we want to think of something. But we want to let the person know that is intrusive and nosy, or feels like you're hovering over them or spying or something. So let's think about how would we say that.
I think something like that should really be said, like, I'll talk to you in a minute when I'm off the phone. And then when you're not on the phone anymore, sit down and have that confrontation or that conversation about it.
Okay, so that's a good point. That's
when you're not, something isn't being involved, and
right. So Cindy said, so we'll say, I'm on the phone with someone right now. So when we're done with our conversation, I'll talk to you about it.
Right.
So that's a good way. Okay. And then you sit down and say, for one thing, if we're having lunch together, and this is really bad with the young people, right? Because they're always doing this on their phone and they're texting and whatever, and we're doing it too, right? Instead of talking, if I'm having coffee with Henry, instead of talking to Henry, I'm answering a text. So one of the things would be to let the person know that you're with someone right now. Can I call you back a little bit later? Because in one respect, when you're with somebody, it's rude, right? To be talking in a conversation. Well, in the olden days, it was rude, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's just what I was getting ready to say. In our day, it was rude, but nowadays it's like it's so commonplace. It's they think it's natural. It's just a natural thing to them.
Right. So what we can say is it makes me feel disrespected when you are visiting with me, but yet you're texting or talking to especially a long conversation, right? With talking to your friends,
Mhm.
and I would like you to tell them that you can call them back later or text later. And so that's the same thing too when we're at somebody else's house. Because my husband was always saying, well, who's that? And he's always talking to me while I'm trying to talk to people too. So, you know, and it's irritating, right? Because like I'm trying to deal with whatever it is we're talking about on this conversation. And then somebody else is
In the background.
in the background talking to us. So that's a very valid and boundary to set, and it's also helps eliminate some irritation and some friction in our relationships.
I know, there's one lady in my apartment complex that we've sort of become we've become friends, and just as God's put her in my path. And it seems like every time I'm talking to somebody from, you know, like Charity or somebody, a friend, a Christian friend, she knocks on my door. And so I tell the person I'm talking to, you know what, Lou's at the door, I'm gonna call you back. And I think that when you have somebody in person coming to you or with you, that takes precedence, unless it's an emergency. I mean, there are those emergencies if you get, but to get on the phone or talk to somebody on the phone while somebody's sitting there, no. And if the person doesn't think it's rude, then I think that it's the other person's obligation to share with, you know, this is really something that isn't very nice.
Polite, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your situation?
If I'm on the phone, you came to my door, you weren't already there. So I'm going to let you know, oh, come in and have tea.
You could do that too,
Yeah,
depending
I
on
could do
the,
that.
you could do that too.
If I'm, yeah,
So I'm not gonna get to the person that just said, I'm on the phone, you come back. Right.
Right.
What you could do too.
So those are two different acceptable situations based on the person that you're dealing with and your own personality, right?
now this person I'm, you know, praying for, and
So you want to make that person a priority
Yeah.
and give them your attention.
absolutely, absolutely, and just, you know, she's a lonely person, she doesn't have a lot of friends, and she's told me in 13 years, I'm the first white person that has let her in my apartment, in an apartment. And I said, oh, of course, you know, I consider you a friend, a neighbor, you know, and so it's become a very positive thing in her life.
That you
and in mine.
welcomed her in.
Yes.
So again, we have to decide on the priorities.
If it's just somebody every time you know, they're just fly-by kind of people, then yeah, I would probably maybe say the same thing.
Well, still, I disagree because even if you're going through something,
Right, well, that's,
you still need to realize that you are not my life. Well, I have other things.
right,
I'm not gonna give you that sense that my world stopped because you're not the.
right. That's what you're comfortable with, right? And so that's perfectly acceptable too. And there are instances when we might jump in either camp, right?
You know, what you could do too, when you're on the phone like that talking, and the knock is at the door, you could tell the person you're talking to, just 1 second, let me clear this. And you could tell the person at the door, I'm on a call, I really can't share in front of someone. I'll get back with you in just a few minutes.
So it depends on the circumstance
Yeah.
too, because right at certain times when if like people are coming to us with a problem, then they have a sense of urgency that when you put them off, it's going to frustrate them more and aggravate their situation. If it's just my daughter comes to the door and she's coming on in and I'm talking to somebody, then, she's going to make herself at home and and I'm going to continue my conversation either in front of her
Yeah.
or if it's something private, you know, in a different place.
Mhm.
Or if it's, you know, something that serious, let me give you, somebody just came over, you know, stopped by, let me give you a call back. But at this particular time, there's a couple of people who, when they contact me, sometimes they're very agitated, right?
Mhm.
So, I try to make space for them because that's part of what's in my heart, right? What's what we do as ministering to people is to help calm their situation. But for example, you're right, like last night, one of these people called me and I'm trying to get ready for this class and she wasn't in a real agitated state and she really cut into my time. And this morning I realized, you know, I should have just said, I'm getting ready for my class tomorrow. Can I get back with you tomorrow? Except for the fact that she said that she's always the one that calls me. So can I call her the next time? Okay. So, let's see, we talked a minute about silence. So that's a good example about people coming to the door and how to nicely tell them, either the person on the phone or the person at the door, that we need to finish this. Can we deal with you later, depending on whoever is in your heart and mind, the one that you need to give the most attention to. And as far as letting somebody know it's none of your beeswax, we still haven't come across a good, polite way. Well, we did say talk about it aside.
To stop them while you're talking.
If I'm in the middle of a conversation, I'll talk to you about it when we hang up. Instead of saying, I'm on the phone, did you leave me alone?
I think too, when you're on the phone and you want a private conversation, if there are other people in the house, then really, manners wise, you should go into another area where you're not in the middle of people conversing or talking, even if it's just one person, but just, you know, excuse yourself and
Right.
go into another room, and maybe that, hey, who are you talking to, wouldn't come up.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right, because there's some things that I don't want. I mean, how many of us, you hear somebody talking on the speakerphone in their car, or they're on the speaker in the store, and you're hearing all this,
Oh my goodness, yeah.
their conversation. It's none of my business, and I don't want to know what this is all about, you know? And those people that you're talking to, do they want everybody to hear what is going on?
I still answer people that are talking to somebody in their ear and think they're talking to me, and I'll say, what did you say? I'm sorry. And they just keep on walking, and I just, oh my God.
You realize that they're not talking to you. Some of us are talking to ourselves, okay? Okay, so there is a difference also between a boundary and a threat, right? Telling the person what you need, not punishing them or hurting them, right? So it's not like saying, if you don't stop this, I'm never going to talk to you again, okay? But you can say, what you're doing or saying right now really bothers me. And if you continue to do that, I'm going to have to limit our contact, walk away, leave, come back at a different time, or hang up or something like that. But they don't have to agree with our boundaries. And I think that's what we want, is people to agree with how we do stuff, right?
Mhm.
But there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Mhm.
And so, the things that are set in stone and black and white are basically limited to the Word of God, right? But our interpersonal interactions are based on me and how I deal with you and how you deal with me. Those two, right? So it's these things are fluid. And I think being able to think on our feet it's a challenge, but the more we go over these kind of practices and thinking about this stuff, the more it becomes more natural in our lives. And the more we can help somebody when we're sitting in a conversation with two people that are in a disagreement and try to help them communicate. That's what it's all about. Communication is the main thing that we do. And learning how to better communicate is important. So moving forward to meet challenges, we talked about some of the challenges and some of the different things that we can face, and particularly boundaries. It's not a comfortable word, but it's something that's come up a lot in my awareness in the last year or so. So there's four steps that we're going to talk about. These aren't the only 4 steps, and this isn't the only order that you can do things, but in the study that I did, there's our 4 steps to resolving conflict, which we can remember by the acronym CARE, C-A-R-E, and that's communicate, actively listening, reviewing the options, and end with a win-win situation. Okay? CARE is communicate, active listening, reviewing options, and ending with a win-win situation. Okay? Communicating is expressing how you feel, and we stick to the facts and focus on the problem, not the emotions or how they're making me feel. Okay? Because we can say, you're always telling me that I'm wrong. Or we can say, I feel like you belittle me because you don't respect my viewpoint on the matter. Okay, so we want to, and give an instance, right? It's not just in general, you're always telling me this or you're always telling me that. Last night when you did this, it made me feel degraded, disrespected, okay? And so we want to stick to the facts and focus on the problem, not on what the person is doing and making me feel, because it's my choice to be resentful. It's my choice to stay in a hurtful attitude, right? To stay offended. And people do, and they feel good about it. I mean, doesn't it feel good when you're justifying yourself and feel like somebody's wronged you? You know? And I think it's a tactic that the enemy uses to separate us in our friendships and in the body of Christ and in our families. So we can use I statements versus you, and blaming you, like you make me angry because you're always late. Okay, so with an I statement, you're sharing and taking responsibility for how you feel. So when we're helping the other person, they're talking about how this action makes them feel, and that they're responsible for for being angry, right? It's a choice. We have choices. Now, if I can stay angry and inflame the situation, or I can choose to follow after peace with all men. I can choose to forgive. I can choose to understand why that person is late. Right? If the person is late because they have little children, well, we know what it's like to try to get ready when you're getting ready to leave the house and they spill their milk all over them and dump the Cheerios, or, you know, fall down and you're getting ready for church and they fall in the mud on the way, and it's like you have to go back in or go to church with mud all over the clothes. So we can say, so we take responsibility for how or when. We describe what happened and with the facts and focus on the problem, not the person, and we use the word because. So we could say, when you arrive late, it makes me feel anxious and rushed because I'm not going to get to where I'm going on time. Right? Instead of, I'm feeling frustrated. Okay. I'm feeling frustrated because I'm worried, not you're making me feel this way. Okay. When you're late, I feel worried. So please give me a call if you're going to be coming late. Or if you're in traffic and we can't get there in time, so that at least we know and we can make plans. So that's part of the problem solving. And I would like you to do blank. Or call me if you're running behind. So we can activate change, which is more, I'm having trouble seeing today. Okay, it's more helpful to postpone suggestions until they feel that you've been heard. Oh, it's supposed to be active listening, not change. There's some kind of typo here. Okay, so we've got communication, active listening. So it's more helpful to postpone your advice or suggestions until they feel that you've heard and understood what they're coming from. And so we're avoiding reactive listening and we're implementing active listening. So communication and active listening. So when we listen to somebody, we're listening with the goal of understanding what they're going through, what happened, how they feel, understand why are they angry, okay? Not just to answer back. And then so I hate this when they say reflect. You guys probably have heard me say it many, many times, because to me that's like a tape recorder and it's a very clinical, cold term, but reflecting back what you think you've heard. So you kind of paraphrase what they've said to make sure that you understood. So if I understand correctly, you were late because you had a flat tire and you didn't, and your cell phone wasn't charged, so you couldn't call me. Okay. So we ask questions to improve your understanding. So, and not interrogating, right? So you're saying, what kind of questions can you ask to clarify in the conversation?
What, about the flat tire
Well,
or anything?
Anything, right?
Well, anything above that word. I said, not me, because I didn't got it. I told you.
Right.
Don't ask me where we have flat tires.
Yeah, it makes it sound like you don't believe me. Do you have any witnesses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, take it away from the flat tire question. He didn't say that you had the flat tire. So, you know, I thought you could say, I mean,
You could say, like, if somebody is late and it's a habitual reason that same reason they're late for, maybe you could say to them, if you plan out a little more, if you do something a little more fair to be here on time.
okay, well, so that goes back to giving advice before you're understanding the situation.
That would be very,
That would be
it wouldn't come out. I mean, it would be.
It would be like mom talking down to you, right?
Yeah. But you know what? There are people, it doesn't matter what you say
Yeah.
to them, it's not gonna work.
Right.
My family.
Yeah.
I'm one of the most
I get
unkind,
it, got some of the
people.
family that
Yeah.
are like that.
And all my kids are always habitually late. And so a couple of my children will say that an activity is happening an hour or two earlier than what it really is, because they know
Yeah, sure,
the other
sure.
person's gonna get there at the right time.
You have to adjust things, yeah.
Right, that's what we used to do with Latin time because,
Yeah, and I mean, it's been years and I always, laugh about it, but seriously, I'm thinking, where did you get this from? I've always taught you to be on time. And none of them are.
right. Some people are always trying to cram a lot of stuff
Yeah.
into their
I think
time,
that's what it is.
or they're disorganized, right?
And that too, that's another one.
Or you go somewhere, for example, if you had a funeral in the morning and you're coming to this class, right? Well, sometimes, things afterwards last a little bit longer, right? So how could we say something that isn't like scolding them or interrogating them to make them
Maybe
understand why
there's
they're,
a question. Is there anything that I could do to help you come earlier? Or is there, would you like me to give you an early call or, a reminder or something? Or would that be helpful or?
well, that would be after trying to understand why they're,
Okay.
why they're running behind. So I'm thinking maybe something about, like asking about how their day was going or something like that, or did
You have a busy morning or?
did you have a busy morning or, no, it sounds like you've had a busy day. What kind of things, or that it seems like you've had a busy day. Was there some things happening that kind of interrupted?
Well, I don't know that, you late already. That's all. That's how I understand it.
Okay, all right.
How about something like, I would say you're always late, or you're late coming to my house. I could say, it really would help me to plan out what I'm presenting to the group today at my house, if you could be on time.
Well, no, say if you could be on time.
If you could something, whatever.
I think right now, I mean, just knowing personally how my kids would react if I said something like that to them, anything, before they were to say something to me, it would come off as confrontational and not received well. Even if everybody was in a wonderful mood, it
Most
would,
people are like that.
yeah. Because, it's just, everybody thinks their time is their time.
It's more important than my time.
It's fine. Do, with person, if they are habitual late, then anything you do, like whoever said, plan it, tell this person.
No, that's what we do.
Yeah.
You know them.
Yeah.
But
That's how they are. So either give them an earlier time or you just be like, okay, I know people see this. Okay, let me go do this first. But why am I don't know. I know you. So why, I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. I know it.
Right, so you would just be taking it for granted that XYZ is going to be arriving 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes after the time, and
Either that, or don't invite them.
right?
Don't talk to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too, because I really have to admit, I'm one of those people, unless it's something that I know that I really, can't be late to. It's like I'm on that, what did he call it? European time or kind of thing. And so like for my doctor's appointments, if my appointment is at 1 on my calendar, I put 12:30 because I know that, oh, okay, if you put 1, you're going to, it's like you were saying earlier, Trish, you put so many things on your plate that you think you can accomplish within a certain amount of time. And even when I don't put things on my plate, it's like, well, where did the time go? Was I moving in slow motion or what happened? Because I had plenty of time. So what in the world happened? So if it's something important for myself, always set the time, a half hour, what would you say, up or back or whatever.
Ahead of time or something.
Yeah, so that I know that I'm going to make it on time to whatever it is. Unless if it's something that I feel, okay, they said at this particular time, but I don't have to be there at that time. Then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you may have said it start at 1, I'm going to get there until 1:30, so I'll get there at 1:30 because it's nothing that's it's not like getting someone to the airport, or the movie starts at such and such time or anything like that.
Okay, so, right, that's true. So what we can do in that kind of situation is, did I schedule this too early? Should I have, scheduled it later? But what we're talking about is trying to understand what where they're coming from, why they're in that situation. So we kind of got stalled on the being late part. So we want to kind of ask questions to get an understanding of what's going on with them and knowing it from their point of view. For example, if I get short with you on a Zoom call, you could say, well, it sounds like you've had a rough day. Is there anything that happened that you would like to share with me, or something? Tell me about how your day's been going, because I could be really frustrated and react to a word or a tone of voice, right? So is there something I can do to help your day run more smoothly, for example? Not in respect to the late, but to asking questions to understand, why is this person in this situation or feeling that way? So let me go back and say, in the active listening, listen with the goal of understanding, reflect back or paraphrase what you've heard, so to give them the idea that you're listening and making sure that to clarify, and asking questions without interrogating, to show interest, to make sure, well, did I miss something? Did you say something that I didn't remember? Okay. And to express empathy. So what we're trying to do is we're helping smooth over and communicate with the person. So we're going to avoid interrupting or criticizing or giving advice, paraphrase or summarize what you've heard and confirm that we got it. Did I understand correctly? And then keep going back and forth. Well, if that's not what I meant, well, I'm not quite sure I got it. Was this what you mean? And because we want to be able to understand what's going on, especially when we're working with somebody else, because we want to help smooth their misinterpretations, right? And sometimes having a third party here to help translate what the people are meaning, right? Because you have a history with that person, and Doreen's like, I'm really had it with this person, you know, but it's totally fresh to me, so I can be a little bit more empathetic. And you don't have to agree with why they do something or feel some way or what's going on. We just can say, I can understand how that would be frustrating to you, right? And I know when you're dealing with certain people and you have something happen, or you spill coffee on yourself, and it's like, or knock this over before you're getting ready to go. It's helpful to understand. I understand that made you feel a little bit anxious and uncomfortable. You may have to set limits on the times of our conversations, right? So, where a conversation takes place. So you might be able to say, I'll have to I have to put this off. We have to reschedule for another time because so I can focus my attention better, because sometimes people are going to talk you to pieces, right? And they just go on and on and on about the same thing, or even when they're dealing with somebody, they're just repeating the same thing. And I'm really sorry. I know you have more to say, but I really need to take a break so that I can give you the attention that you need. All right. So limits help us to remain calm as we listen. So that's when we're dealing with somebody else, but personally, but also you can see somebody's getting frustrated. It looks like we need to take a little break and either come back later, reschedule, revisit this, okay? When somebody is not listening to you, let them know that you feel unheard. Because some people talk over us, right? And they don't listen to what you're saying. And say, well, instead of saying, excuse me, I'm talking, or getting an attitude. You know, when you don't let me finish my thought, I feel like you're not listening to what I'm saying, that what I'm not saying is not important. Okay, so reviewing options. We don't want to feel pressure to come up with just one answer immediately. So what we talked about earlier, we said, well, Doreen said you could do this with the person that comes to the door or is on the telephone. And Cindy said, well, we could do this, that with the person that comes to the door, it's on the telephone. And you decide which one is the best one at the time. Okay. Because each situation is different, and each personality is different. What works for me that might not work for you, and what works for the person, what's comfortable for the person you're dealing with, might not be comfortable for another person. So when we're trying to have a meeting of the minds and hearts, we want people to be comfortable, right? And not feel like this person always gets their way, and I'm feeling like I'm being ignored or stepped on, okay? There are barriers to finding solutions, okay? We have what's called a mental set, which is an unconscious tendency to approach a problem in a particular way, which is shaped by our experience and habits. For example, because of maybe you're the middle child, right? And there's always that quote, we talk about the middle child syndrome, which the first child gets all the attention and the other one's the baby. And so the middle one sometimes feels like they get the short end of the stick. So because I'm the middle child, then I always have the attitude that I need to assert myself and do something outstanding to be heard. So every time I'm dealing with somebody, I'm acting from that starting point, right? Which I'm not the middle child, I'm the first child. So
I'm a middle child.
So I think I'm supposed to be the bossy one. I don't know. but I'm not. I'm really not. So that mental set is the framework where we always have that attitude that this is where we're dealing from. So how I'm going to deal with a particular situation because of my background and experience is different than Henry, or different than Doreen, or different than any one of us, because our experiences and our foundations are different. Okay. What's happened to us has shaped our experience and our habits. So we deal with things like the same way all the time. And so we only know this particular way of doing things and not any other way of doing things. And so we kind of limit us on how we're going to approach a situation. So what we're trying to do is think out of the box, see things from a different person's perspective. Okay. And a mental set leads to unnecessary constraints because you're placing unconscious boundaries or limits or borders on finding the solution, because I've only ever done it this way. Right? So, I mean, I understand, like, for cutting hair, there's really the outcome is the same, but different people do it in a different way, right? Even if it's the same technique, especially if a person is left-handed versus right-handed, right? How a left-handed person performs a task is different than a right-handed person. So we're trying to think out of the box. We want to avoid a barrier. Another barrier is irrelevant information, where it's presented as part of the problem, but it's unrelated to finding the solution. And it's not important focusing on the fact that they have too many cats to the fact that they're always late. Right? It's the fact that it's your opinion they have too many cats, but if it was they wouldn't think they had too many cats, because if they thought they had too many cats, they would get rid of some. Right? So, I would avoid coming into your house with too many cats. But it's not important, and it's unrelated to reaching a solution for the being late. So we want to keep focusing on what's the real issue. The real issue might be that you're interrupting me and being nosy because or you could be controlling, because there's some people that are controlling and they want to know everything about you. So they want to know who you're talking to. They want to know who you're seeing. You want to know what you bought at the grocery store. And that's their problem. We don't have to let them know every single thing. So we can say, I'm not sure how this is important to the conversation. Right? And we want to focus on the real issue. So there's different problem-solving styles as well. There's the socially sensitive thinkers. What time is it? 2:13. I thought we'd be done early today, but I'm guessing we're not.
There's a lot of knowledge.
Well, no, we had some good discussion. So that's important, because it's important for the interaction, so that the information that we're covering can be applied to our lives, right?
Right. But you know what, too, we have to be aware of and work with this in a way. No matter how much we know and try hard, there are going to be people who won't receive that. And I don't know what you do when you get there.
Well, sometimes we just have to walk away, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem that I'm helping the situation, so I guess we'll just have to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
And, we are not God, and we cannot solve everybody's problems. So, there's different ways that people problem solve, and 4 of them are socially sensitive thinking, logical thinking, intuitive thinking, and practical thinking. So the socially sensitive thoughts are considerate of others, and probably when we're dealing with people, there's a mixture, right? They're considerate of others, they're guided by their personal experience, expressing compassion. We're checking on the impact. How is this impacting the other person? How is it affecting them? And the socially sensitive wants everybody to be satisfied, which is really impractical, because to be satisfied, perfectly satisfied, everybody's going to want to get their way. And that doesn't satisfy the other person, right?
Okay.
So we try to treat others fairly. We focus more on emotions and values, or most on emotions and values. And we use past methods that have been successful versus the facts of the situation. So we're working on our experience. And then there's logical problem solving. It's analytical, and we're looking for all possible solutions. So if we're going back to this, the telephone situation, Doreen was saying, this is how she's done it, and Cindy is saying, this is how she's done it. So you would be relying on your past experience, instead of looking at, okay, we could do it this way, this way, this way, which is what we did to show that there's different ways of doing it. So we're looking at the different solutions, relying on good judgment, trying to be reasonable, use common sense, and we want all to be treated equally, which we know doesn't work. Everybody wants to be treated equally, but we're not all equal. Some of us are more intelligent, some of us are stronger, some of us are more reasonable, some of us, we're not the same. We don't all have the same amount of money. We don't have the same skills. So if you've got a PhD in philosophy and I barely graduated from high school, we don't have the same skill set or the same ability to make the same amount of money. Right? So to try to implement that, I make the same amount of money at this job flipping burgers at Burger King, and you're a professor in college, does that make sense? It's not fair, but you get paid, but based on merit, not because we want everybody to be all the same. So equal is not necessarily feasible in all situations. So we're trying to develop solutions and choose the best option, and remove ourselves out of the picture and stop dealing emotionally, right? Which is a big thing when you're dealing with people. They're looking at their emotions and they're looking at their needs, and either they don't care about the other person's, how it affects them, or they're just so consumed with their problem that how it affects the other person is of lesser importance. So we have the socially sensitive, problem solving, logical, intuitive, which is considering the future. Obviously, intuitive, we're basing things on gut reactions. We use communication that's creative and imaginative solutions. We're doing quick solutions based on hunches versus facts and logical thinking. So you look at the past problems and how that's been solved, and we use that in the future, and we're looking for, there's possibilities. We don't always have to do things the same way, so we can, there's a different way we can do this. And it's a positive approach, looking at the bigger picture, and it's very useful when factual data is not available, right? If you don't have medical tests, with numbers to deal with, there's other ways to kind of compensate and deal with a physical situation. And after intuitive, there's practical. You're focusing on what's real, trusting your experiencing, trusting facts, using perceptive and understand practical applications, you're methodically, carefully working toward conclusions. So you're following steps. Like some of us read the directions, and some of us look at the pictures, and some of us only look at the paper after we've tried to figure it out, and we can't figure out why it's not working, right?
I think we're all guilty of all of those.
Yeah.
At least I know I am.
Why are all these folks left?
Sometimes it's because they give you extra because we lose them, right?
The baby look at the instructions and you wonder, who's planning how they get or not? Huh?
But I think when we're looking at these different ways of problem solving, they're limited, right? So if you're only thinking one way or doing it one way or only following your guts or only, trying to follow the steps, or you're not looking at the bigger picture, and it's limited. But learning about that there's different ways to reach conclusions and problem solve helps us by taking bits and pieces of what works, right? So, for example, in the process of problem solving, you could use practical thinking to see the problem situation as it really is, and use intuitive thinking to brainstorm all possible solutions, and logical thinking to weigh the consequences of all the actions. And I think that's a problem with people. We just decide without thinking. The Bible talks about you don't go to war without considering the cost, right? Or if you're going to plant a field, how much is it going to take, right? Or build a tower, not plant a field. Build a tower if you're not going to have enough money to finish it. So you're thinking about the consequences. And as far as socially sensitive, you're thinking to weigh the alternatives. How does it affect? So practical, in the practical sense, emotions can get in the way, and it helps to see the facts. Okay, I've really done this. This is the summary after that. But we're answering who are questions. This is kind of interesting. When you're in the practical problem solving, you're answering questions: who or what caused the problems, where, what happened. Sorry, I just got this update on this thing here. Sorry, Madeline. I gotta close this up. I hate when you get these update things and it flashes on your screen. We're answering questions: where or what happened, when or what was the reason, with whom did it happen, what is each person's part in the problem solving. With intuitive, you're asking questions: what other ways can we look at the problem? What did we learn from the gathered information? What connections are there to a bigger picture? How did the other people fit into the picture? So you're considering what everybody else's involvement is. Another question is, what do you think caused the problem, or possible ways to approach it? With logical problem solving, you're asking the question: what are the pros of each option? What are the cons? What is the outcome for each option? And what is the result of the option for each person involved? With a socially sensitive problem solving, you're asking questions: how does each alternative fit in with our values? How are those involved affected? How does each alternative help each individual? And how do these alternatives enhance positive interactions? Anything we want to ask or talk about here so far? Anything that?
I like the different types of thinking, sort of breaks it down to when you are maybe dealing with something.
Well, I think one of the things we have to understand is we all have different gifts and talents and ways of operating. So realizing that there's something beyond my way of handling it, that it gives us more tools to reach out and grab to implement in our daily lives. So, I mean, this past couple of things that I've been studying have really helped me to try to be more proactive in my dealings with people, and just in my personal life. And then by doing with these different activities or thoughts or words or working through this in my mind, I have it kind of stored in my heart and head for when I'm dealing with a person, because we have the scripture that talks about the Holy Spirit brings the word that we've already sowed into our heart to our mind. Well, also because we're Christians, the Holy Spirit can bring these different things to our remembrance. If I've never lifted 25 pounds of weight, then when I have to do it all of a sudden, I might not have the strength to do it, or I might throw out my back. You know what I'm saying? So by exercising these different things, we are preparing ourselves, right? I could never run a marathon. I would never want to run a marathon. That to me is crazy. But, you know, there's people that like that type of activity, but to do that, you have to train. And that's what we're doing here, is we're training ourselves so that we just can spontaneously step into a situation and help calm the waters and help facilitate the communication and help people see more than just that little bit that's right in front of their eyes, right? So tips for effective problem solving. Approach it with an upbeat and positive outlook. There's nobody that's going to want you to help them if you're thinking that this is not going to work out, right? And, you know, God has a solution. He's with us. So we know that he's helped us all these years that we've been walking with him, so that he's not leaving us and abandoning us. So we know that he's going to help these people, and he's going to help us to get to the end of the road, right? Respect each person's perspective. I think the feeling that I am wrong because I don't agree with you or see it your way can really, it just kind of closes down any desire to work together, right? If you know, I don't have to say much more. We want to avoid blaming. We want to avoid people blaming in the conversations. One thing we don't like is to compromise, but sometimes each person has to give a little bit in order to get a solution that's good for everybody. Because if it's only good for you and it's bad for you, then it's not one of those win-win situations, right? We want everybody to be coming out better and not having one person benefit at the cost of everybody else. So we want to compromise if necessary. Be flexible and patient, especially when we're first learning these skills, right? So how do we respond to a person that becomes defensive, right?
I think you listen to what they're saying and then ask them questions, open-ended questions to see where it's coming from. Perhaps, you know, it's the anger that whatever the situation is bringing that defense mechanism out.
When we're scared or hurting, we kind of get tense. But if somebody knows that we're interested in their point of view and understand what they're going into, we can help bring down the barriers, right? But we don't want to turn to focusing on comforting someone instead of solving the problem, right? So sometimes you know, people might cry or get upset and you want to just, oh, it's okay, but it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable when people are upset or angry, but we don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on the heart of the matter and help us look at what the issue is and make them feel that they're understood. That's not always easy. So you might say the information I'm going to share with you may be difficult. So I'm going to give you some time to process it. So if they've shut down, right, give you time to process it, and then we can come back and take a look at it later, right? So if they're not receiving it, right, because we talked about not receiving it. And I mean, if you're just offering unwanted advice, then
Yeah, you know, you could say to them too, you know, I don't want you to feel that I'm coming at you. Sometimes I have trouble explaining what I want to say. So maybe we can meet in the middle and make it work.
well, that's a good thing. Sometimes I have trouble, what did you say? Explaining what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, because that's putting their frustration on your lack of
Yeah. it's sort of
Communicate.
leveling the playing field.
Yeah.
In a way.
and we often do have trouble expressing what we're trying to say, or we say it wrong
Yeah.
and it comes out bad. So instead of trying to calm them down, we could also say, I can see that's upsetting you, so I'm going to give you some time to think about what I've said for a day or two, or whatever time frame that you need to, and then we can, you know, talk about it some more. If they're repeating the same things over and over again, it seems like we're not really listening to each other. So let's continue this at another time. So I'm just saying these things are different ideas, because this is stuff that comes up, and we're trying, if we don't, you know, how do we get out of this, right? How do we make it go forward? We have to know that there's times we're just going to have to give up, because people are not going to work on a situation, or we're not going to be able to resolve the situation with the person. If someone's changing the subject, I don't know what that means.
So when you're talking to them, they're changing the subject.
There's some phrases here in between yeah. It says, remind them we need to stay on the topic, or we're going to have to start again.
Yeah.
Or begin again another day. So there are people that jump around. I don't know what this other stuff is that.
Well, one time when I was in counseling, counselor said to me, every time we would say something, I would try to talk about something else. And he asked me, he said, are you too afraid to talk about what I've asked you? You know?
That is a deflective thing, right? We do, and sometimes we are, you know, so that.
Yeah.
And so you have to.
And I told him, I said, I'll get there.
Right. Sometimes we're just so scattered, right? Okay, so let's talk about some different steps in problem solving. Defining the problem. So sometimes there's more than one problem. There's more than one thing that's flying around. So you got to focus in on what's the most pressing issue, and or be specific, right? Is it the fact that you're not sleeping at night, or is it the fact that, you know, you're
Drinking 8 cups of coffee before.
right?
before you go to bed.
You know, is it because, right, some people get up in the middle of the night and because they just, as we get older, some people will wake up at night, and sometimes they're drinking the coffee, right? But we want to,
chocolate.
yeah, there's caffeine in that. So we're trying to focus on what is the issue, what is the problem? Is the fact that they're not sleeping that makes them irritable, or they're just inconsiderate. Right? And not walking in love. Especially we can talk about that when they're Christians, right? So we're picking what the most pressing issue of the conflict is, and be specific and identify it. It's the fact that, you know, your tomato sauce upsets my stomach, so that's why I'm not eating it.
There you go.
What?
Well, that's being specific, right?
That's honest.
No, you shouldn't say your tomato sauce. You should say the tomato sauce.
But this recipe,
Yeah.
this sauce recipe is, you know, upsets my stomach. Right, that's true. Is this the problem, or is it the feeling about the problem? Right? So we have to differentiate. There's a problem. I can't, but the feelings are the result of the problem. So we're not trying to solve the feeling of being irritated or disrespected or angry or hurt or offended, because if you solve the problem,
Those things will go away.
the feelings will go away. And that's a lot of times, you know, today people want everybody to feel good. You're putting your Band-Aid on it and you want to identify. This is what we're talking about. What is the problem? Okay, why? The problem is not that you're late. It's the fact that when you're late, I can't leave for work on time. Right? And getting the family, the people, or the team that you're working with to all be on the same page. Right? What is it that we're all trying to resolve and working for a solution that's good for everybody? Step number 2, problem solving with POW. We use past experiences, P, finding options, O, and prepare for W, what ifs. Okay? So, because plans go astray, right? I may intend to call you when I'm on my way so that you can be ready to go, but I left my cell phone at the office. I left my whatever. So if you don't hear from me, try to give me a call. Or you're trying to meet with somebody to take them to an appointment, and because you want them to get their treatment, but your car breaks down. So people have to understand things happen. Things happen. Even when we're intending to do the right thing, things happen. So when we're problem solving, we want to list who's going to do what and when. For example, if somebody is irritated because they're not taking their insulin, okay, and so it's causing problems with the family. So you might say, I can contact you at this time of the day to see if you've remembered to take your medication. Okay, so, or if you're doing something like you're getting ready to move, well, you're going to do this, go get the boxes, and you'll have them here by Tuesday at 5 o'clock, and you will take the stuff out of this cupboard, and you'll be watching these kids, and Roger will arrange to get the truck and have it pick it up at Thursday at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Who's going to do what? So also we're setting limits. So we have, first of all, being specific about the problem, using POW, past experiences, checking out the different options and preparing for things that go awry, what ifs, and setting limits. We want to stay calm. We want to focus on the facts. We want all the people involved to be on the same page. We want to know what the expectations are for everybody and the outcomes, the possible side effects. And no nagging or criticizing. And when you're dealing with a problem solving, one person needs to be communicating and kind of directing. Like if we're talking to Henry and a child and one of his children, okay, I'm not talking to Henry and Cindy's not talking to Henry and the child is not talking to Henry. One person is the one that's communicating, and we're communicating clear expectations. We can understand that when we set boundaries or we have expectations, that there are consequences to not following those expectations or to following those. If we're doing if we're late leaving, we might not be able to get a parking space, right? So we need to try to leave a half hour early so that we can be sure that we can get a parking space close to the venue. Okay. Or if you're trying to say, I need you to take your medication. Well, let's go back. Let's do a better one. A child with a bedtime limit. Okay. If you don't go to bed on time, this is going to happen. So the child is saying, well, first we're going to do this. I'm not going to, or if you're leaving with a babysitter, whatever. So if you don't go to bed for the babysitter, they're going to try to go, this is what's going to happen, and expect them to not want to agree to the bedtime when you're there and not want to agree to the bedtime when you have a babysitter. So what that's example is just that we can expect that people are going to stretch the boundaries and the limits, right? So somebody might, if you're talking about calling before they're late, well, they might be calling after they are supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm running late.
Yeah. Really?
Really? Well, I'm sorry, I already left. I couldn't wait for you any longer, right? And also, like if you're making consequences for the boundaries, don't make a consequence that you're not willing to follow up on. For example, if the other day, my daughter was saying, if you don't eat this, you don't get ice cream. And this particular child has a problem chewing. Okay, so you have to finish this ice cream, and it's like, she could see that little girl was having trouble eating and was getting tired of chewing, and she's saying, maybe I should just give her the ice cream. And I said, no, you've said it so many times that if you don't follow through on that, then you've kind of...
It confuses the child.
It does. So you have to be willing to enforce it. Or if you're going to continue to speak to me, I'm going to have to wait until not talk to you again for another week. you know, so if you're gonna call them the next day, that's not enforcing that, right? Or you just keep talking and letting them talk to you that way, right?
Aaron Bell will say to me, Grandma, are you ready to tell me you're sorry yet? I said, no, I'm not. I said, you are a showbiz child.
Okay, and step 4, evaluating the solution. Okay, so if we've set a solution for a problem, like how are we going to organize this moving, or trying to get somebody to arrive on time, like we were talking about, okay, we need to set an amount of time to evaluate if that process is working, right? So we'll see how it goes for a week. All right. And then you get back together again, reconvene and say, well, this didn't work and this didn't work, so we'll try something else. Or has the problem remained after that time? Or is there a new problem that's come? First of all, we dealt with this being late, but now we have this other problem to deal with. And you keep going back and evaluating your solution and checking back until either the problem is solved or we decide that it's just not going to work, right? Yeah.
But you know, sometimes as an adult, we become immovable and it's not easy.
Right, because we have that mindset, we're rigid, and as we get, well, I mean, not everybody is flexible as a young person either, but when we say we get set in our ways, the more you do it the same way, the more set in your ways we get. So not every solution is effective, but we do need to give enough time to see if the option that we've chosen is going to work. And if you feel if it's not working or we're starting to fight about it again, it might mean that we didn't have a solution that was positive for everyone, right? So you might be saying, you know, it irritates me about you not being late, and you figured out, well, how about if I give you a call a half hour, you know, before you're supposed to be here, to kind of give you a heads up that it's time to get ready to go. And you do that and it doesn't work. They still keep finding other things to do or stopping off at the store on the way. Then there's something that wasn't helpful to that person about motivating them to respect your time, right? Specific issues, some people don't feel they need help or that there's a problem. Other issues are the people involved, the family or the person, they don't agree on the solution. And sometimes we have fear of what might happen, like you were saying with that therapist. Are you afraid of what the outcome would be? So a way to address it is, I've noticed that you're sleeping in too late, and I'm concerned because you're staying up too late and you're being late for work, and I don't want you to lose your job. Okay, so instead of nagging them about staying up late or, you know, being
What the real concern is for them.
right, and that sometimes people feel trapped, and we need to help face the facts and find peace. So we avoid taking action because we're not looking at what that real problem is, right? Some people don't think that it's a problem to have a drink. like when they go to an outing or a party or whatever, but then they're not facing the realization that it affects them driving home, right? So we talked about nothing gets better through avoiding the situation, right? So, and also focusing on the future. So if you're feeling like this is restrictive, or we can look at the positive outcome of change, right? I'm not going if I go to bed earlier, I'm going to be fresher in the morning and do a better job at work, and I could get a promotion, I could get commendations and awards or whatever in my file, recognition, in my file, instead of getting written up for all and being late, and I get raises. Okay. When we're working with people, stay hopeful. It's difficult for all the different variables to line up. I think if we're trying to work for a solution and we're not hopeful, then I think that's part of our job, right? Is to instill hope, and part of that, of course, is through God working in the situation. Understanding it's difficult for all the different details to line up. It's difficult to get everybody on the same page. We need to expect the people to respond, expect them to hear, expect people to try to understand one another, and follow through is the hardest part. Once we've implemented something, to walk through the actual acting out of the solution, so we need to follow up and try not to give up. And so that's what I've got here in these notes. So I guess we made it into 2 hours, which I was thinking that it'd be shorter, but
Saved 8 minutes.
we saved 8 minutes. So
We didn't use it.
Oh.
So is there any comments or thoughts or something that I was rambling about that
No, this is great because
didn't coordinate in?
almost everything you've talked about, we've all experienced and maybe didn't do as well.
Yeah, better late than never, right?
Oh, my, I can think of, oh my.
What, Madeline?
What I got out of everything is that, we really have to become, and I think someone else had mentioned it in the class, really good listeners. You have to listen. You can't be so quick to, jump in with your, attitude or whatever. You have to hear the other person out, and then you have to be calm enough with logic to, give back your answer on it. But you have to, you really, really, really have to be a good listener, and you have to give that other person the opportunity to, speak on the matter.
Right. And trying to, when people know that we're trying to understand where they're coming from, it helps us to be more willing to work together too. So
Right.
This going through this stuff helps us, like I mentioned at the beginning, deal with the people that we deal with. But when we're the intermediary and we're a little bit more objective, it can help us bring 2 or 3 people or a group of people together to kind of bring some calm and some focus to the situation. Because I think that's a lot of what our problems are, is we're only looking at how it's affecting the one little thing that we're involved with and not how it affects the other person. So when we're dealing with something, we want Joe to give in completely to what I want. And he's not going to be happy. And so that's, it has to, if it doesn't work for both people, it's not a long-term solution. Now, sometimes, like if somebody is going through depression or has a physical illness or problem, where they don't have strength or control, or they're kind of, if you're dealing with a lot of pain, it's kind of hard for that person to give. So sometimes we need to give more on their side so that you can reach a longer term solution. So I think we get real hardliners, this is how it has to be, and I'm not going to. So that's one of the things about when we're dealing with the consequences, understanding, well, if someone has a mental illness, it might be more difficult for them to follow through and act, but still they have choices, right? So you kind of be understanding, but also be firm and loving about this is eventually how we have to work.
We have to learn patience,
Yeah.
and I can remember the first time I was in counseling, I defied that guy so hard, so much. But it was years later, I was able to go back to him and thank him. I told him, I said, you taught me as much as I could learn at the time. And it just, I grew, I became an adult.
Yeah. I mean, even if they don't listen now, maybe someday it'll sink in. It's like parents, right? We hope someday that what we did, they'll be acting on it. So,
Okay.
okay.